that we don't want in the recording.
Okay, sure. So this isn't live then. So there's pretty low pressure then.
Yeah, bro. Like it's I mean, typically like we're just building this podcast up so we don't have like millions of people watching it right now. So it's not a big deal.
Oh, it's cool. Well, hopefully this will be a good one to add to the repertoire and get some listeners in. We can talk about some of the things we're mutually passionate about. But before that, how you had a
Yeah.
new baby a couple weeks ago? Is that right?
Yeah, let's talk. Let's pick off. Yeah, I was looking at my text message right now. I was about to send you a link, like people don't know we actually know each other really well. We've known each other for what, a decade, if not longer?
Yeah, we've known each other since way back in the day. We had a passion of tonic elixirs, and you're the man that's doing it in the DFW, holding it down. And I can't believe that we still don't have a tonic bar. I mean, I think I'd love to hear more about what you're doing here, but just in some of the places that you
Yeah.
go in New Mexico and Los Angeles, all around the world, they have these places where community can come
Right.
together. And I don't know if we
Yeah.
have that full vibe that I've been wanting.
Well, we'll go into that, but yeah, for sure. But yeah, I was on my phone and I was like, oh shit, yeah. He mentioned the baby. You're having a baby. I just had a baby. It's our third. This is your second. So congrats, bro.
Yeah.
So has she gave birth yet or no? You
It's
still
it's any
waiting?
time, man. She's having some contractions already. It's like, within that week period
Nice.
where it's like any day now. We have no idea. I
Yeah.
officially started
Yeah.
paternity leave yesterday, but I'm still working, of course, all the time, but seeing patients less, which is nice.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. So mine is a month old. So she turned a month
Congrats.
last Thursday. So yeah, we were in that same vibe you're
Congrats.
in a month ago. And
Yeah.
yeah, I did the home birth. Um in that we had a tub we like rented, not a rented, but the midwife kind of gave us, but we ended up going in our own bathtub. And luckily I have the whole house water filtered, and softened and all that. I know it's not RO
Nice.
water going in the bathtub, but it's better than
Yeah, that's
anything
right.
else that I can do. But
You didn't
but
you
yeah,
didn't
man,
ozonate
it's
that water. You didn't hydrogenate that water. I'm just kidding.
yeah, I know, right? I did add magnesium to that water, though. That's one thing I did do.
Nice.
Throw some magnesium chloride in there, so
Okay.
just to help
Okay. That's
soften
nice.
everything. And yeah, man. Well, I'm happy for you. I'm so glad you're having another one, bro. Isn't being a father just the best thing ever? Like it's
It is. It's like, some of this is like, okay, we want to change the world and we want to build our businesses and we want to, share our knowledge, but certain aspect of not striving, of just being like in the normal day to day and chopping wood and carrying water, that is really
God
fulfilling. And
bless that. Yes, yes. Chopping wood and carrying water, bro. There.
yeah.
Ah, you just gave me tingles. I'm actually holding a ceremony this weekend, and there's a few songs that come up with that,
I-
saying in them. And you're right. I mean, it's so important that we, yeah, move away from this, like our goals and we have these dreams, we have our goals, we're driven, we're young, we're in that place in our life right now, right? Like that we're
yeah.
building and we're growing and sharing. And you know, it seems like the older I get, the more I realize how unimportant that stuff is in comparison to family, to community, to
Yeah.
connection, to the present moment. Because, man, it's so easy to get distracted with the rat race,
For sure.
and what we think. And, you're an amazing guy. And I've known you for so long, and you always bring this very calm Zen energy every time I'm with you, around you. And that's part of the energy that I feel like I lose a lot when I'm in that rat race. And so
Mm.
it's just so good to hear you kind of voice that too from your own perspective. And it's beautiful, man.
Well, thanks, bro. Yeah, I've always just admired your go-getter attitude and creativity and brilliance. And Your mind works really fast. And for me to say that to someone is a really big compliment because, I'm a Gemini double Aquarius and I'm all in the mental sphere, but your mind goes faster than mine, I think. So kudos to you. It's all those tonic herbs and ways that you really optimize your brain and your health. So kudos to you.
Likewise, man. Well, on that note, because we know each other, but people listening have no idea who you are. And so, would you mind giving a little intro to who you are and what you do and all that goody stuff to kind of get the ball spinning in that direction?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Dr. David Morcom, and I am a pharmacist by trade. This was my old life over 15, 20 years ago, but I've been working in the functional medicine field. I have my own clinic here, Integrative Wellness FX. We see patients all in the Dallas area, but we also are telemedicine, so we see patients all over Texas and even other parts of the country. And we really just deal with complex chronic disease, and we help support people to carry them from these places of suffering and pain and anxiety back to full optimal health. We also take people that are just wanting to optimize, to biohack, and to really live their highest self. And what I'm really passionate about and what I'm really proud of is that we're actually doing pure functional medicine. So going to the deeper roots of what's actually causing the inflammation and addressing those. So we see health like a tree, and a lot of times we are using all the best of natural medicine, and I'm very passionate about that, as you know. Love my herbs, I love my tonics and adaptogens and cool technologies and hyperbarics and PEMFs, and I've got it all here, and it helps me to live a very optimized life. But at the end of the day, just because of it's natural, just because of it's new and shiny, it doesn't mean it's fixing the root problem here. And a lot of people that come in to see me, they're on perfect diets, they're taking all these herbs, and they're still really sick. And there's root systems of the body often that are off, that are causing this inflammation, that throwing off all the other systems. So with the tree metaphor, the roots are actually rotting. We need to identify what those are actually being caused by, cut off those rotting roots, and fertilize from the ground up. When we do that, all these other systems start falling back into place. All the leaves start getting green. All the branches start getting strong. And it's really the most cost effective, time effective, and only true way to heal long term. So I'm doing a lot of gut work. I'm doing a lot of detox. And the thing that I'm seeing more than anything is that people are coming in with so many chemicals and so many metals and mold
Yeah,
in their system. And it's never
yeah,
been like this before. Even 12 years ago, when I was seeing people, some people would have metals, of course, but now everyone has metals. It's not if they have, it's how much do they have. And
right.
these things are really just inhibiting our ability to live that full healthy life, because that is a god-given blessing, that we should have vitality and resilience to the
Mm,
world. We shouldn't have to take a bunch of supplements. We shouldn't have to use all these technologies just to feel good. But people are in this uphill battle because our world is so toxic. So I'm really passionate of really doing cellular detox to get these things out of people's systems, because nowadays people's immune systems are so weak, all these chronic infections are coming in. And we can talk
right.
about ozone and all the technology and cool herbs and things that you're using here to help people with that, which is brilliant. And it's necessary because people's immune systems are just so haywire because of all the
Yeah.
things we just said.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, where do you think that these pollutants, these metals, and these things are really coming from your perspective? I mean, because I totally agree with everything you just said. It seems like it's just getting worse and worse, and there's just this heavy load. And I wonder, I'm like, is it all just environmental and we're all getting dosed with it? Is it And then on that note, is it because we're in cities versus in the country, or is it our food supply that's causing it? Or is it a combination of everything? Like, what's your
Yeah,
perspective on all this? Like, why has it increased so much, right? It's kind of a
yeah.
phenomenon in a way.
Yeah, sure. I think you're right. It's coming from numerous different places here, and our political environment right now is interesting. Is having this conversation at a higher level as well right now, and a lot of the things that we've been talking about in the integrated field are becoming more widespread and accepted as truth. And it's so interesting that it's taken so many decades for the things that we've already known, we've already recognized, our problems finally being recognized by our government and higher structures. But The food supply obviously is part of that, and all the glyphosate in our foods, and that's what gives me
Yeah.
hope is that even if we could take glyphosate out of the wheat process of how they use it as a desiccator to dry our wheat before it comes to market, silly practices like that just don't make sense. That are obviously horrible for our health. That are causing leaking gut, but leaky brain, leaky all our parts of our body. That glyphosate interferes with that boundary between the outside world and inside world. And so if we don't have
Mhm.
that, things are coming into places they're not supposed to be, and our immune system's freaking out. So we have this higher inflammatory load simply because of some of this leaky gut that everyone has to some degree in some way. And it's not all glyphosate. There's so many causes of that which we can talk about. But I think that the thing that is not talked about and is starting to be, which is interesting, which almost gets to a place of thinking like it's a conspiracy because it's so wild and so unbelievable, is all the geoengineering that's happening. And sometimes I question all these things, but I went to a conference filled with a room with hundreds of doctors here, actually in Dallas, and we were
Mhm.
talking about these things as fact and looking at the research and looking at the science and sharing stories. And it's very clear that there's a high source of heavy metals in our environment that's increasing at an exponential rate. That even me, in again, last 10, 15 years of just seeing these labs over and over, am seeing it constantly with everyone now. And where is it coming from? Well, it goes back to the story of industry and how, taking fluoride, for example, which is more documented, more accepted, and where a lot of actual states have now outlawed it, right? So like Florida was one of the first ones a couple of months ago, but many others have
Yeah.
joined that. And it's because the aluminum industry has fluoride as a byproduct, and they would usually have to spend tons of money to be able to dispose of it properly. So they resell it to industry to then really sell it to our government to put it back into our water supply for our own health. But there's obviously problems with that. It's not just topical. We're taking it orally. It's affecting our iodine and thyroid production, our brain health in
Mm.
many different ways here. But the same thing's going on with these metals, and this is the scary part: is that these industries have these metal byproducts, and it would cost a lot of money to be able to get rid of it. And what I understand about it is that they are selling it back and they're throwing it into the skies as geoengineering to be able to help manipulate the weather, they say. But I have a lot of speculations on that and concerns about that because I really don't think that's the whole picture. And I think there is a financial
Yeah.
incentive here. It's obviously not good for our health.
Right. Yeah. When you say financial incentive, I think about, big pharma and everything they're doing and how, it's not healthcare, it's sick care. And they make money off us being sick. And they make even more money off throwing this shit at the wall and hoping it sticks type symptom, you know, fixing thing. Right. And it just turns
Yeah,
out that like that's a very profitable model for them. It's just crazy, the amount of money that's spent in that world, of just pushing medicines on people and what it's really doing to not only the physical body but the psychology of what that implies, because people can be like, oh, well, if I don't feel well, let's go to the doctor, I take a pill, and everything will get better. You know what I mean? And always this exogenous thing that's supposedly going to help them. But I think that there's definitely an internal battle that's happening in with all of us too, because we're so caught up in
yeah,
in just our lives and being busy or whatever that all is,
totally.
and now with social media, it's even worse because you know comparison is a thief of joy, and it's so hard not to create that when you jump on even back in the day, like MTV Cribs, right? That's when it first started, right? We see all these
Yeah,
people, rappers and artists making all this money and like living the lifestyle they live. And now you see that shit on social media and it's even worse, because people are obviously more glued to it than ever, but people are showing even more of their lives, and
yeah,
what they show isn't really the truth, right? You're seeing these glimpses of people's lives of glamour, but in reality, like for example, like Justin Bieber or whatever, like you think this dude's rich and famous, but then all this stuff that's come out and you see the videos out now, you're like, dude, this guy is he's fucked. Like what the, they're all
Yeah.
fucked, you know, like, and you see them, you know, it's like, woo. So yeah,
He's
man.
got Lyme, by the way, and he sleeps in his hyperbaric, so he's kind of gotten into the health journey himself, and I think awoken through some of his own suffering and pain, and I think a lot of us are awakening in that way, and I have a lot of compassion for where we're at right now in society, and I understand that life is really hard, and people's brains are really
Yeah.
inflamed, and they just want answers, and they do just want a quick fix and a pill that's going to magically take things away. And I
Yeah.
totally connect with that desire. But the
Yeah.
reality is that, when you take a quick fix, it's causing other problems and issues. And, a lot of the solutions from the pharmaceutical realm are just knocking down that inflammation, taking a steroid, and steroids mimicking our own endogenous cortisol system, right? Which throws us
Yeah.
into fight or flight. It gets us to run away from that tiger, knocks down the fire, but also drains all our hormones and drains our immune system, drains our energy
Yeah.
systems, and throws our blood sugar way higher. And so I had a patient yesterday, even that he has been on a steroid and they said his adrenals don't work. And so instead of taking all the adaptogenic herbs and tonics to really rebuild things little bit by little bit, they're just shooting the synthetic hormone up and they feel good, but they're running on a credit card. They're running
Right.
at a debt. And that energy doesn't come from nowhere. Energy is coming from our metabolic reserve, our adrenal reserve, our
Yes.
kidney jing, and it's being
Yes.
drained. And then, they then are getting diabetes because their blood sugar is so much higher when you have all that
Right.
steroid, that cortisol in the system. And then when they do come off of it, they're worse off than they've ever been. And then I'm coming
Yeah.
in here months, years down the road to try to put back the pieces when, if you
Oof.
could just have addressed initially, it could have been an easy fix, putting them on
Right.
some of these tonics and adrenal supports. But even the adrenals here, what I'm seeing is such a superficial fix. And, people are doing all these tonic herbs and other things. And I think that's so great and so important. And they're going to integrated doctors and they're being put on all these supplements to get their energies up, and the NAD and the hormones and the adaptogens. Awesome. But they stop taking it and they feel bad again because there's deeper systems that are creating this
Yeah.
inflammation that are not being addressed, like toxicity, like the gut issues, like these chronic infections and the nutrient deficiencies.
Mm.
And then by that time, it's there's just deeper things. They just keep on this cycle of ups and
Yeah.
downs.
I would say the number one vitamin that everyone needs is vitamin N, nature.
Nature. I was like, what
Like,
is that? Okay.
I knew you were gonna be like, what the fuck's he talking about?
Some
But
new
yeah,
research
I've
here.
been thinking about this really hard, because it's like everything you say is spot on, and there's all these root causes, and I think a lot of it, in my opinion, starts with overconsumption of caffeine and coffee because it's been so glorified. And when Dave Asprey came out with the biohacking thing and he like glorified
Mhm.
coffee and everything, like there was such a surge where people were just pounding coffee, 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 coffee. And when you talk about the adrenals, I always like to tell people, I'm like, look, coffee doesn't actually give you energy. Caffeine gives you zero energy. It just tricks your body into thinking you're
Yeah.
not tired. And what you feel is your adrenals. And like you said, eventually that system stops working because that is only supposed to be utilized during fight or flight. So in a situation where we're getting chased by a tiger or life or death, these are our life or
Yeah.
death hormones. And so they should be used in life or death situations, not
Exactly.
Monday morning, 8 o'clock, AM. And then you pound 300 milligrams or 200 milligrams of caffeine and you go sit in a
That's a
fucking
lot.
desk and you just sit there and you try to like mentally work. That's a lot on the body. And look, I was there. I've been there. You know what I mean? I thought that was the way for so long.
Sure.
Luckily, early on, I got put on cacao, which I know you know and love very well. And, even though cacao has caffeine, it's got like 10 milligrams compared to 150 to 200 milligrams. And it's really the theobromine that is the compound inside cacao that when we look at like, wow, how's this giving me such clairvoyance and energy and focus? It's that theobromine, which isn't a central nervous system stimulant, which doesn't inhibit oxygen and
Yeah.
blood flow to the brain and does not block adenosine receptors which then elevate adrenaline, and cortisol, which is like what we don't want. But regardless of all of that, nature heals that shit. Like I was reading this study too the other day about the Schumann resonance in nature, right? And then thinking about like our heart, and our heart has an electromagnetic field it's pulsing out, and then the earth is pulsing out this field. But when we're inside, or when we're in the city, or when we're just doing our thing and we're not connected to nature, we disconnect from that frequency, especially with 5G
Yeah,
and Wi-Fi.
for sure.
And that disconnection is almost like an astronaut in space, right? We hear about how like their bodies age and everything when they're in space, like there's no gravity. They're not connected, but they're also not connected to the Earth's frequency as well. But as soon as you step out in nature, get your feet on the earth, and this is free. As soon as your barefoot touches the earth, not only do you get free electrons from the earth that start
Yeah,
hitting that K1 meridian right on your right foot, start giving you literally free energy. So if we say electrons, just so people know, like the earth gives you
yeah.
literal free energy just by stepping on it. And that's why the hippies hug the trees, because they got even more electrons from hugging that tree, right? The trees have their own power and their own consciousness, and plants have their sentient beings, right? And so just being still and connecting to that, we're finding out it's not only calming the heart, calming our electromagnetic energy we're producing, giving us free energy, but there's even something deeper happening where if we calm ourselves in nature, not just be in nature, we start activating gray area in our brain. So it starts creating new neurons and dendrites and new connection sites. And we start creating a higher sense of awareness, which, in my opinion, is creating a deeper sense of feeling. And this is the big problem. When we disconnect from it, we lose the ability to feel. And I feel like feeling has levels or dimensions, right? It's like you and I could sit right here right now. We could say, "Oh, I feel good. I feel great. Hey, how you doing? How you feeling?" We say this to each other in common conversation. "Oh, I feel good. How you doing?" Even if you feel like shit, you'll be like, "Oh, I feel great. Yeah, everything's great. How's everything been going? Everything's good." But and you know this because you meditate, when you soften yourself, when you get in nature, when you quiet yourself, you start to feel things that you never felt before, and it activates and unlocks veils that have been basically blinding us, right? Blinding our
Yeah,
perceptions on life. And it happens also with too much sex. Too much. I see this a lot. A lot of guys I talk to, that pornography, and even if they're not watching porn, they're like, "Oh, I gotta have sex every day, and I gotta ejaculate every day, and I gotta get that out of me every day, or I'll have blue balls," or all this bullshit. And I've just found over the years that, like, man, cultivating that energy and getting out into nature creates this higher level of awareness, this higher level of feeling
yeah,
that really tells you, once you connect to it, what's wrong with your ass. You know what I mean? Like, you start, because once you get to that level, as soon as you get back to normal, or what you consider normal, which isn't really normal, like you said earlier, to add to what you said, it's our birthright to be happy, healthy, horny, have vibrant health. And when we lose that, we lose that feeling, we get back to baseline, you're instantly able to check that and be like, "Oh, I'm energetically off here." Um, so yeah, man, it's a trip, right? It's multi dimensions of healing, and that's part of the caveat too. Is a lot of people are so sick, they want that quick fix, they want that thing, and I totally resonate with that. I have empathy for that, and the toxins and the metals and everything, and it's just like we're constantly getting microdosed with these poisons, and
yeah.
it kind of makes it hard to be like, okay, what do I change? Especially when you get on Instagram and you see influencers like, "Oh, the paint in your walls is giving you cancer. The there's formaldehyde in the scent of your laundry detergent, the Teflon pans, and don't get me wrong, all this stuff is important, and we
Exactly.
need to slowly level up. Like, you don't need to be using scented candles and air fresheners and laundry detergents and cleaners. You got to get rid of that shit. I'm baking soda and vinegar. Gosh damn, like that's what my grandma used. Like that's that will
Yeah.
fix so much there with that, you know. And it's important, but at the end of the day, we we kind of have to figure out where is the actual starting point at and what is the most important thing to focus on. But to also understand that we're slowly being just bam, 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 microdosed. And this is like a bucket of water that's just filling up, right, David? Dr. Dave? Like, it's just filling up and it's overflowing, and you got to lower that load. So it kind of goes into that same analogy you talked about, cutting off those dead roots and fertilizing. So I mean, you tell me, when I hear cut off roots, I'm like, get the metals out, get the poisons out. And then when I hear you say refertilize, it's like, first mitigate the exposure. That's changing the pans and changing the chemical cleaners and all the air
Sure.
fresheners and the candles, right? Okay, stop the pressure from coming in so much. You can't stop it all, but stop as much
Of
as you
course.
can, and then start to fertilize with like good foundational nutrition and lifestyle. I think lifestyle is one of the things that I think is a big missing element to the equation of health. Because we're so fixated on the allopathic model of like take a pill for an ill that it kind of carried over to tonic herbs. It carried over to health supplements. That ideology, right? It's like, okay, I take a pill for a symptom, but now I can just take an herb for that symptom and that'll help heal me. But are you modifying your lifestyle? That's always kind of like see is being a big issue, doom scrolling, porn, not getting in nature,
Sure.
no sense of community, you know?
Charles, you are talking my language and saying so many things that I have things to say about. And man, there's probably like 5 or 6 things that have been coming up as you've been talking that I want to share with our listeners here.
Let's go.
But, on the last note here, what you're saying, I think in some ways, because we have this continuous flow of toxicity that we're being exposed to, we have to recognize that, and we can try to minimize that as best as we can. But life is crazy and chaotic, and there is always going to be that source of toxicity and influence. So really, in this modern day and time, it's can we generate a system that is so strong and vital, and that can handle all these things, can hold all this. And a lot of this is by continuing to empty that bucket, like you're talking about, consistently through daily practices and through taking detoxification support on the regular basis, doing detoxes every spring or every couple years at the very least. But I'm always doing regimens here and there to keep myself clean, keep these things out. And I think that's important because these metals, when you look at some of the actual chemistry here, is that they are destroying that bioenergetic shield that surrounds us, that protects us. That is how energy is made and how it protects us all the time. And so we have this energy shield that when we are exposed to these toxins, we can neutralize this oxidative stress, these free radicals, with these electrons here that are there to support us and to
Mhm.
protect us. And we can get this from nature and from plants and antioxidants and these phytonutrients, all the colors of the rainbow. The brighter the color, the more antioxidants. But really, again, taking out the things that are putting holes in this energetic shield, like these metals,
Mm.
which just bind to these electrons and eat them all up. And then when we aren't going into nature, we're not grounding, we're not surrounded by all these free electrons to rebuild the system. Yeah, we're at very vulnerable. And then we collect oxidative stress and damage, which creates inflammation, which throws cortisol up, which drains all the systems of the body until our cortisol and hormones can no longer handle it. And then we're fatigued and we're sick and we're ill. And then instead of rebuilding, at some point you have to just realize that you've messed up or that the world is crazy and you need to just do the work, and you need to keep not give yourself to the world and be everything to everyone. And I think one of the biggest tips here I see people of dealing with complex chronic disease is, even when I support them, we give them all these herbs and these nutrients and they're feeling better, they start giving it away to the world and their family and their friends, and all that is valid and it makes sense. But if they can hold it for just a little bit longer, to reinvest that in themselves, to do the
Yeah.
deeper work, to really do that kind of detox and gut work like I'm talking about, to reset these root systems of the body, then they can have stability long term. Then they can eat what they want. Then they can go a couple of nights without sleep, without having issues, and
Yeah.
they can be imperfect, because it's hard to be perfect here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So on that note, so metals, like for me, I've always been a big advocate sauna user, right? And I prefer the infrared over the dry heat sauna. I don't know why. I've
Sure.
had a clear light for 20 years. And I just felt like the infrared, the data, the science. I feel like there's a few people out there, the ones that have jumped on the sauna train because of like Joe Rogan and these big influencers, and they're all using that ambient heat air style saunas that get up to like 400 degrees, not really, like 200 something plus degrees.
Sure.
And then you've got the people that have read the actual science on sauna, and they've went more of the far near infrared route, right?
Yeah.
Because which is actually light, that it's not really like heat per se, as it's light and it can penetrate the body like six inches from each side, and that seems to have a better effect at pulling out these metals
Because what's
than.
going on here is, that these toxins are fat soluble and they go into the cells of the body. And, what's one big thing of fat? It's our nervous system, it's our brain. So they are collecting in our nervous system at higher concentrations than other places. What else is fat is our mitochondria. It's got a double phospholipid layer of how we make and create ATP through that electrochemical gradient there. So if you lose polarity of the cell, or if
Mhm.
you have all this toxicity in that membrane, that's interfering with making ATP, which is our vitality, our life and energy to do anything and everything we want to do. And so we need therapies and treatments and herbs to be able to go into the recesses of the tissues and the nervous system where they're hiding, to actually mobilize them and get them out. And so
Yeah.
sauna, for example, is going in there and it's vibrating things at a really, really high level, shaking some of these things out of the cell membranes, allowing them to go directly into the sweat instead of being mobilized into the bloodstream like normal saunas there. But now we also have cool technology as well. We use something called liposomal nanoparticle technology. And I'm really passionate about this because this has shifted everything for my patients, where I'm actually able to get people better long term and have stability in their lives, because we're able to do cellular detox. So not just like a little liver gallbladder support here, because those are just the drainage systems here. These are
Yeah.
the easy things, and that's where we want to start: cleaning the blood, cleaning the organs and the lymph and the kidneys and the liver. But the reality is that these toxins are inside the cells and the mitochondria, like I said. So we need to
Mhm.
be able to go at that level. And using these nanoparticles, they're liquids you put under your tongue and they go directly into the bloodstream. But even better, they go across the blood-brain barrier into the cells themselves, and they're able to bind it, process it, and move it out at a very methodical rate. And we're able to use binders to catch it as it comes out of the liver. So, we're moving it out, we're processing through the liver, using bitters to move it out of the bile, which is the vehicle for toxicity to leave the body. And we're binding it in the gut to carry it out of the system. So it's a push and then it's a catch. And it's a methodical process. It makes it a lot gentler, but we're able to do IV nutrition from the convenience of home for a fraction of the cost. So, we're able to get 500% bioavailability with these very small nanoparticles. So it's shifted some of the traditional herbalism that we've used, but in a new, modern, elegant pharmaceutical delivery system in a way, to be able to get best of
So
both
could you
worlds here.
could you elaborate? Like, are you talking about like nanode L-glutamine or glutathione, or what are the what's the actual, I guess, compound that's been obviously liposomal is when you add like phosphatidylserine, which I've always wondered about that oil because I've always heard that's like a seed oil, but I don't fucking know. Like I just read shit. I don't know
Yeah,
half
yeah,
of it
yeah.
is true or not. And then this whole nano thing. But what do you feel like is like the big mover? Because that's powerful for something to be able to go into the cell and not just pull it out. Because a lot of things can pull metals out of the cell, but then now you got to, you're like you said, they're in your bloodstream. So now it's
Yeah,
like if you don't get them out of the blood and get them completely out of the body, then you're going to retoxify yourself. So I would
yeah,
love for you to kind of elaborate a little bit on like, and if there's a few there that you guys use or
sure.
whatever, I'm super intrigued.
Yeah. So first of all, a liposome is just a fat bubble that looks like our cell, and it's made of the same things that make up our cell membranes. And so
Okay.
phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine, all these things you mentioned can be part of it, but it's mostly phosphatidylcholine is used as the emulsifier to create this bubble. And then they put the medicines inside, which can be many different medicines, which we can talk about, and they put sound waves and vibration into it to turn into nanoparticles. They get really, really small, so they're clear. When you look at them, you can see through it. That's how small these nanoparticles are. Because just because it's liposomal, doesn't mean that it's actually getting deeply into the cell there.
Yeah.
You can
Liposomal
make
and nano.
liposomal stuff at home as well, but it's just maybe
Yeah.
not as the same quality as some of these pharmaceutical grade where they have these multi-million-dollar machines to make them into really, really small molecules.
Okay.
But then we're using different molecules, and it's not any one thing because there's a lot of, it's more like a process. If you're using just one thing along that process, you're not really you want to carry these very gently from where they are in the tissues elegantly outside of your body. And there's many different steps to that. So if you're only doing one step but you're not doing the other steps after it, you actually can be mobilizing toxins to create more oxidative stress, and then it gets dumped out of your liver, and then 80% of toxins get reabsorbed back into your body
Right.
again, and then they go back into the tissues a lot of times, and sometimes they go back into the brain. So that's why IV chelation and things like that I don't really think is the best way, and can
Okay.
be dangerous in some ways. And it's better to do like a low dose where you're moving and mobilizing a little bit, you're processing it, you're binding it, and you're getting it out, and then you mobilize a little bit, and you're doing that twice per day, and you do that over a period of time of a month or two, or it's different depending on your toxic load
So
there.
you're adding a binder to this kind of regime. Not, I was under the impression the nano, the
Yeah.
lipid nano kind of do it all, but it sounds like maybe they're going in and pulling it out of the cell, and then you're obviously thinking like, okay, let's use some binders now too to help bind this out of the stools.
And so there's different substances. So on the push side, we're using different things like glutathione, for example, which at
Yeah,
higher
so
doses can go into
great
the
one,
cell
man.
to
Yes,
mobilize things, to start
so
barging
good.
into the cell, master
Yes,
antioxidant, master detoxify
yes,
the body.
yes.
And then
Increase with
there's,
ozone therapy.
yeah, there you go. And there's new molecules like ergothioneine that comes from medicinal mushrooms, from shiitake and things that we've been using more recently as well. That
And those are
actually
nano, and they're nanoized like mushrooms basically. So it's
yeah, they're nutraceutically extracted, and then they're put in these nanoparticles. But ergothioneine is kind of cool because it's something where glutathione only acts the day that you give it to someone, where it's
right.
protecting the system that day. Where ergothioneine is there for a whole month. It's got a long, long half life in the system. It's sitting there in the background
Wow.
just to protect you, bind something, and then go back and kind of when it's needed there. And we're using a lot of things to upregulate NRF2 pathways, which is a master
Yep.
pathway of detox that the cruciferous vegetable pathway, acts on as
Broccoli
well. We're using things for
sprouts.
getting methylation, these B vitamin
Yeah.
pathways open. So
Yeah.
all the phases of detox are also important. So a lot of this is able to use because different toxins require different pathways and
Okay.
combinations of
I'm
pathways to
flowing with you
appropriate
now.
detoxify.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you have nutrients. All these pathways have different cofactors that are necessary because detox is a
Yeah.
highly nutritionally intense process. You have that whole component. But then even if you're doing all that, if you don't bind it, then it's
Right.
gonna reabsorb. So a lot of times we will take a binder a half an hour later or something like that after taking some of these
Yeah.
nanoparticles to catch it, and then we eat dinner or breakfast or something like that
Right.
later.
Man, I did a video on IG once, and I was talking about these binders like zeolite, charcoal, and
Yeah.
clay. And man, I got hit hard. I got hit hard. These people, I had like this one lady who looked, I'm not going to hear to talk shit or whatever, but she looked like she didn't look like she was very healthy, and and I guess there's people out there though that have like had bad experiences from binders apparently. Like I never personally have. And I've
Mm,
always looked at the Dr. Huda Clark, who's like cured thousands of people from cancer with her. She was more on the parasite angle, right? But also the
sure.
metals, right? And so like the green clove, black walnut, wormwood, all of that herbal combo
Hmm.
with the binders, you know what I mean? That was actually what the video was about, is a parasite cleanse. And this
Cool.
lady just went after me about these herbs being too bad, like, oh, these are going to hurt people, these are damaging people's bodies. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, and I'm looking at this lady and she's, obese. She's not overweight. She's obese. I can see inflammation. I can do my just scan of her face and see where she's holding metals and holding like all this toxicity, and her liver's all bound up just from her stories and seeing her do her lives and shit, stuff like that. And then in my head, I'm like, well, how in the hell are you getting this stuff out of your body? Because it's obviously not. I can obviously tell it's in you. But yeah, so you're big on the binders as well. It sounds like it's not like big on, but it's part of the protocol. You've got to get that stuff bound once you've pulled it out of the cells so that you can
And then
get
different
it out of the
binders
body.
there's different spectrums of activity that different binders have, and so it's important to
Right.
know what toxins you're dealing with.
Yeah, like charcoal
Ideally,
doesn't really take out metals from what I've seen.
it's not the best. No.
It's not the best. I feel like clay and zeolites. I mean, you tell me though, what do you guys like? 'Cause you're always on the forefront of this. That's why I love talking to you, bro. Like you always
Yeah.
got like the greatest, and you're practicing still. Like I stopped practice, and so it's like,
Yeah.
anyways, I love you, man.
Oh
I love
yeah.
hearing your
No,
stuff. I
I
love
love and
it.
appreciate you so much, Charles, and what you're doing, and bringing tonic herbs to the West and to the U.S. and to Dallas here. So I use your stuff all the time, and it's some of the best quality. It tastes good. You can feel the energy in it, and that's what I appreciate. And but yeah, practice.
What do you like to
My
use?
greatest teachers are my patients, 100%, and I'm learning
Yeah,
things
yeah,
every
yeah.
day, and just figuring it out. And people are getting sicker and sicker. I've never seen this amount of sickness to this degree. And what I mean by that, is post-COVID world, especially people's immune systems are so haywire and such a PTSD state that they are reacting to everything. People are coming in that they can't even eat the healthiest ketogenic diet.
Are,
They
are
can't
these
take
people that
any
got the jab
supplements.
though? Are these people that got the vaccine that you're referring to, or people
Not
that
everyone,
didn't?
but a lot of them are. Yeah, a lot of them had
Okay.
COVID, and COVID just triggered a highly inflammatory state of this PTSD reaction. We call it mast
Okay.
cell activation syndrome. When there's mold
Right.
toxins, it might be called chronic inflammatory response syndrome. But the immune
Right.
system is so hyperreactive that it can be hard for practitioners because you can't even give them medicine. You can't even put them on a good diet. So it takes us
Right.
very specific strategies to put out the fire and kind of move the lymphatic very slowly,
Yeah.
start emptying the bucket just enough to create some space to be able to do some detox and deeper work. Because when you are doing detox, when you are killing things, it is mobilizing some of these toxins. And if your bucket's so full already, it's going to turn into this histamine inflammatory response, and
Yeah.
can be pretty miserable.
So,
And
so some people aren't even ready to do these cleanses and detoxes, is what you're
oh
finding out. It's
yeah,
like
not
first
at
you
all.
gotta
I mean,
like get
usually
them. Yeah.
Yeah, usually we start with the adrenals and the tonic herbs, and the rebuild the hormonal systems and the mitochondria, get them feeling better. So they just have energy reserves, and their symptoms are down. But then we usually will start with some gut work if there are gut related issues, which a lot of people do, just because when the gut is all damaged, a lot of these toxins would be reabsorbed anyway. So we want to kind of
Yeah.
clear out the exit vehicle. So when we do dump things from the liver, they're actually able to go out much easier. But
Yeah.
plus, when we deal with the gut, neurotransmitter inflammation falls, and so many of the symptoms fall just in itself. But the big piece here is moving on to the liver and doing some cellular detox. Because I think in our public consciousness right now, gut health and gut restoration, or understanding the microbiome, is at an all-time high. And even
Mm,
lay people understand the importance of this, and they're doing this, and they're doing the diet, and they're taking some of the gut
yeah.
supplements. sometimes that's not even fully enough, because they're not killing things, and there's these biofilms that are protecting these bacteria, that are these mucilaginous layers, for example, that you need 10 times the amount of antibiotics to kill something when it's in this biofilm. So it's really knowing how to kill these biofilms and disrupt them, and then using these antimicrobials to really kill them. Because if you just
Yeah.
starve it off with a simple diet, and then you might feel good for a little while, then you go back to a normal diet and you have issues again because you never actually killed off the infection. So that's
Yeah.
one mistake. But the other big mistake I'm seeing as a pattern here is that people actually have a lot of toxicity, and their bile flow stops because of it. And bile is what keeps this bacteria. And it's antimicrobial, but also keeps a lot of this bacteria in the large intestine. It's kind of pushing it down out of the small intestine. We don't have bile flow. This bacteria keeps on coming back into the small intestine, causing SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth,
Mm,
over and over again. And then these toxins are just damaging the gut, because this bile is so toxic. When it gets dumped out of the liver, it is very inflammatory, it is very irritating. So it
yeah.
re-damages the gut again. It keeps the immune system weak, so these infections will come back again. And also the biofilm is made of these metals. The candida is so smart that it'll utilize mercury, which is liquid metal, to solidify the rampart parts of its castle wall, to immobilize your immune system, make it much harder for it to deal with it itself. So it's, I hate to be negative here, and I think a lot of people can make a lot of benefit just with diet and lifestyle. But I'm to the point of just trying to make a point here, is that if you're really sick, sometimes diet and lifestyle is not enough. And you really, at this point of disease in society, you need some things, and sometimes labs to assess what toxicity, what type of parasite, really what are those things that are rotting your roots of your tree, to just very
Yeah.
empirically identify it and treat it.
There's a Hippocrates quote to add to what you said. It says, extreme remedies for extreme dis-ease or disharmony in the
Yeah,
body. And it just kind of adds to what you said. Like, yeah, you can change your diet, you can even improve your lifestyle, and you will feel better. But at the root, you got to get in there. I
yeah.
remember when I did like a bone broth feast, digestive reset, where we would wake up in the morning and we would spit in a cup, like a glass cup of water. And based on how your spit would travel down the glass, you could see like the thickness of your biofilms. You could
Mm,
see how much gunk you had. And the way it worked is you did this to see where you were, and then you did this diet, right? And then when you got off of it, you would check to see if you're like breaking those biofilms down. But it wasn't just like a diet; it was like a whole supplement regime.
sure.
And I think a big part of it was DE and charcoal,
Mm,
diatomaceous earth and charcoal. So apparently, like the DE is basically like a bunch of like spikes right under the
yeah,
microscope, and it kind of clings to the biofilms and kind of doesn't break them open per se, but it starts to kind of disrupt their field, if you will. And then the charcoal can help kind of like pull that shit actually out of your body.
yeah.
But like this diet was pretty intense. Like it was like no dairy, no very little. There wasn't a ton of meat in it. It was a lot of bone broth and a lot of like slow cooked, almost like Dr. David Jubb's cellular biology, biophotonic style diet,
Mm,
where there's no nightshades. I mean, it is like the diet was pretty intense. So when you started talking about biofilms, I started thinking about that, and I was like, man, you're so right, man. Those biofilms. Some people have gunk, especially here in Texas, right? Like we're in the windy. It's windy as shit. People get upper respiratory infections like all the time, sinuses. Shit's always blowing in the freaking wind, and gunk, mucus buildup. Like we just had a baby, right? And I'll take her outside, and both my other kids, like Asher was born in July, so she's like kind of like summer had happened, right? So the allergens were low. And
yeah.
Bubba, my boy, he was born in January, so the allergens weren't really present. But Alexandria was born kind of right in the middle of this kind of like pollen. And I remember taking her outside, and literally within 3 seconds, she's like, "Achoo! Achoo!" This little baby is like a week old,
Oh,
she's like
poor baby.
sneezing and shit, and I see like her eyes starting to kind of gunk up, and it's like, I want her outside. This was like the second day she was born because I was like, okay, I need to get vitamin D on her. I wanted to get some sun on this child, and in the early morning, it's kind of like my opportunity to take her from mom as well. So she has time to like, breathe for a little bit because she just
Yeah,
took care of her all freaking night long. God bless
mhm.
these women, man. Women have the most important, the hardest job in the fucking world, and it's called motherhood. And until you actually, as a man, sit and watch a woman go through what she has to go through, this thing's living inside of her, the things that happen post pregnancy, the baby's still attached to her, even though it's out of her. Like women, oh my gosh, the divine feminine, right, has been so suppressed. And it is a shame that it is, but let's just take a moment and recognize that women literally do the hardest job in the flipping world, and that is
Amen, brother.
bring our offspring into this world. Like, holy mother of pearl. It just
Thank you,
blows my
thank you,
mind.
thank you.
Yeah, God
Yeah,
bless.
yeah. As my partner right now is like in the last week of her pregnancy and having some contractions and things already. And so you just had a new one. I'm having a new one here. And so going through this journey of parenthood again, and seeing a lot of people with a lot of these fertility issues, the same component of toxicity is playing a huge role here. And I'm
Yes,
very passionate about this, just recognizing that 25% approximately of your toxic load as a woman goes into the
to
baby
the
through
baby.
breastfeeding and pregnancy. And
Yep.
so I'm very passionate about women doing some kind of detoxification, or just we're focusing on their health for a few months before they conceive, because obviously autism rates are at unspeakable rates of 1 in
Yeah.
34 or something like that, and increasing every couple of years
I'm convinced that's from the
exponentially.
vaccines, man. I'm convinced the autism, because like when you look at the data of when the vaccine started getting pushed on the population,
Yeah,
autism just shot up. And like
sure.
before then, it was not even a thing. Like there was no such thing as a kid being autistic.
Yeah,
You
we had
know,
like
it
one or two, a few vaccines that were, when I was born, at least, by the first year or two, it wasn't very high. I think we have 96 or something like that. I forget this. I read it yesterday because this is being talked a lot at the higher level, of course, with RFK. But I think vaccines are definitely playing a role. I think there's
yeah.
just a lot of variables going on here,
Yeah.
and what I
Microdose
see,
from everything. Yeah, for
microdosing,
sure.
but then a lot of the kids, I specialize in genomic analysis. I've been doing this for over maybe
Okay.
12 years at this point. I'm one of the first people in the field to really kind of master this in the DFW area. And so I take people's genetics. It can be a 23andMe, or we actually just use more sophisticated labs and protocols at this point. And we can generate 100+ page reports to understand your disposition to disease, what foods and things you might be more react to, types of exercise, but
Hmm.
also detox pathways. And so
Okay.
some people are not able to methylate. They have something called
Right. I've heard about
MTHFR,
this.
right?
Yeah.
This is the most
Yeah.
important, probably, gene in some ways. I do very detailed work, but I check MTHFR for every single patient that comes in because it's so
Mm.
common in our population. And it's such a big deal. And so many people with
Do
chronic
you
disease
do you think
have this one gene.
epigenetics can affect that though, or do you think it's like they're just predisposed and that gene is expressing or not expressing itself? Do you
Yeah.
think epigenetics could play a role? Do you think like Joe Dispenza them and they get into meditation and all of a sudden they can
Yeah.
now
Yeah. Yeah.
methylate better? Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a great question because we can combine our understanding of the power of thought and epigenetics, environment, and the emotions that we feel, the people that we're around, the environment, the toxins that we're being exposed to, the diet that we're eating. Definitely 80% of the picture of health. So before I go over any kind of genetic data with people, I say these exact same things to put it into context of what we're really looking at, but 20% or more is still pretty important. And there's certain gene mutations that are more extreme that you
Right.
really do need to recognize and understand and change
Yeah.
something in your diet or lifestyle, or
Yeah.
maybe
And
supplement
that's
with,
where I'm
to
at.
just
I'm
sort of
like,
open up that pathway. Because
yeah.
there's certain times we have a double mutation. So for example, you have
Okay.
MTHFR and you have one mutation, you got it just from mom or dad, but you have one good gene. So epigenetically, you have the ability to maybe upregulate the production of some of these good proteins that are working well and
Mm-hmm.
functional. to be able to maybe counteract that in some way. I believe in being able to methylate, which inhibits it tightens up the DNA and those certain genes maybe that aren't as good, that are pro-inflammatory, and can block that expression. And they can open up the areas of the gene to allow that mRNA to go in there to encode the genes that are actually positive for us. So yeah, we can manipulate and change that through epigenetics and consciousness. But at the same time here, when you have a double mutation, you don't have a single good gene here. It's pretty hard to be able to, there's still, ways that you can shift. But when we're looking at this here, we can see where these big blockades in the genetic biochemistry is. And then they can
Okay.
just eat those foods and take that simple supplement. And it's like,
Yeah.
yes, we can meditate all day long for hours a day and maybe be able to counteract some of the negatives of the world around us. But is that practical? Is that efficient even in our time?
And
If
it's
we can just
not.
take a
People
simple
won't do
supplement
that.
that can
Yeah.
repair and open up that entire pathway, and
Yeah.
then spend the rest of your time just like being a productive member of society and contributing to serve in this time of great need. So
Yeah.
I try to find a more balanced approach here, because I see the spirit aspect of things and consciousness being supreme, but you got to deal with it at both ends. And I come
Right.
from a
Like, and
community, Charles, I think both of us do, that like I feel very grateful that people are really into the mental emotional work and recognizing that the aspect of consciousness and emotions. But then these people sometimes don't actually give enough precedent and importance to the actual physicality and the practical and the
I agree.
biochemical
I
aspects that
agree.
are actually
Yeah.
going on. And you got to address it from both ways. This is the temple and we need to take care of it.
Right. Extreme remedies, extreme disease. Going right back to that quote,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, you can't. And that's something with like Bruce Lipton and stuff, more so than Joe Dispenza. Joe Dispenza's doing his thing. I think it's amazing, actually.
Yeah.
Bruce
Totally.
Lipton, though, I remember when I first got into his stuff of epigenetics, and it's like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but people aren't practically going to be able to apply this. They're going to be able to just wake up tomorrow and change their job and change their relationships and change their trauma that's embedded in their
Yeah.
myofascia, which is not fucking going anywhere until you deal with it. You know what I mean? Issues in your tissues.
You
So
could take some ketamine, some psychedelics with some good body work at the same time. You could release some of that.
Of
But I
course,
hear
of course.
you.
Yeah, of course. But that takes work and time. And,
Yes.
especially with psychedelics and stuff, it's not for everybody. And,
Yeah.
I got big into ayahuasca like 10 years ago, and I got ordained under a Santo Daime shaman and really went down that path. And it changed my life, absolutely
So
changed
cool.
my life.
Love it.
And I love it. And I still use the medicine when I can. But that is not for everybody. I sat in circles with people that just came because they saw the YouTube video or they wanted that healing and they wanted it bad. And I literally saw exorcisms happening. And I was like, and these people, don't get me wrong, they would transform afterwards and they did get better. But
Yeah.
when I think about the majority of the population, I'm like, not even God bless these shamans, especially the Shipibo, because the Shipibo in Peru have really opened up their doors to anyone and everyone. Like, they don't even care. Like, they'll bring you in stage 4 cancer and they'll deal with you, and God bless those people, because I
Mhm.
can only imagine what type of spiritual warfare they're going through and when they're holding space for these people. And it's just like, it's mind blowing. But anyways, to circle kind of like back to what you're saying, yeah, it's got to be both, man. I think you gotta hit it from both angles. Like, yeah, you need to meditate. Yeah, maybe you need to look at doing some psychedelics to kind of like open up your subconscious and dig in there and start to kind of
Yeah.
like pull the files open and be like, okay, yeah, you were beat at 1 years old and you didn't even know, and that shit's stuck inside you, and that's causing all these patterns and stuff. And
Yeah.
then on the way, like, I remember being like 3 or 4 years old, running around the house drinking water out of the hose in the backyard, like, you know what I mean? Like how, and that's when the hoses had lead and shit in them. I got a
Yeah.
bullet in my foot that the doctor told me he could never take out, so I know I'm constantly dealing with lead poisoning. You know what I mean? That's just not going anywhere. And so
Uh-huh.
it's like, yeah, man, we live in a day and age. Shit is different now than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And yeah, we do need to apply, spirituality, but we also need to apply the science that we are learning. For a long time, David, I was such a purist. And I was so into
Mm.
like this, the hippie doodah of it all and anti-supplement. And Matt Blackburn with Mito Life, he really woke me up to the power of supplementation. And you
Mm.
as well as a functional practitioner, like holy shit, like the L-glutathione. I remember you guys were pumping that out when I went to your office maybe like 10 years ago and did a little talk
Yeah.
with you guys, you know, and oh man, I was like so anti that stuff. But then as I grew up and matured and like looked at the science and actually talked with people that practiced as well, um, man, they're powerful tools in the tool chest, and they are not to be shunned. They are not to be denied, and they need to be brought to the table. And really, I feel like what people are willing to do, you know, because there's 1,000 ways to skin the cat. Let's be true, right? There's many
Sure.
rivers that reach the sea. But what someone's actually willing to do is really actually the best thing in the
Yeah.
world for them. Because compliancy is the number one factor to all this stuff. Regardless of what we have or what you should or shouldn't do or what you should or shouldn't take, if you're not going to do it, nothing's going to work. It's not nothing, you know, it's not going to you're not going to magically heal. So you've got to find your path and know. I think some people are so confused too. You know, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. There's so much information. Like, it was so funny. Like, you'll get on Instagram, don't eat meat. It's bad for you. And you scroll over,
Yeah.
I only eat meat.
Yes.
And then it's like these extremes, you know what I mean? And so people are confused. And I feel like that is the Aquarian age that we are in. It's the air sign. And it's like, and the demonic forces are using that to create confusion. Um, and and now anyone and everyone can get on a freaking channel and start talking like they know what the hell they're talking about. And they might be right, but they're probably wrong because there's no fix all for everything. And
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
you know what I mean? Like I do fall back on like common things that I feel like everyone should do. Clean water, right? We can't deny that.
Sure.
Get
Sure.
off all the processed food as much as humanly possible. I don't give a fuck if you're vegan, vegetarian, paleo, keto, carnivore, raw, primal. Get off the packaged bullshit. We can all agree on that. Let's find common ground and let's stand there. Because if we find common ground, it doesn't matter what diet or what you're saying, we all stand together because we're all agreeing that processed food is shit. We're all agreeing that we're pushing ourselves too hard and we're not contributing maybe to society in a way that creates community other than personal gain. And so there are some common things, and I like to see that talked about more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but that doesn't go viral. No one gives a
Sure.
shit
Yeah.
about that. Everyone wants those extremes. They want those fights happening inside the comments.
Uh-huh.
And that's what people don't get. Like these people that go viral, it's not because their content's so good, it's because their content is so controversial. And
Mm.
and that is what creates this algorithm spin. But that is what the demonic force wants. It wants you to argue, it wants you to bicker, it wants you to fight. And that's what everyone sees. And
Yeah.
that's a trip, man. That's like, it goes back to Timothy Leary. Like, what is it? What did he say? Check in or unplug or whatever, turn in, turn out, or turn on.
Drop
I
out.
forgot what he
Yeah.
said.
Uh-huh.
My mom would know, but I forget.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I agree so much with you, and I just think it's so funny how everyone thinks that what they do as a profession or what this one herb or supplement is going to fix everything for everyone. And there's a lot of extremes here. There's a lot of black and white thinking, and the reality of our world is complex and nuanced,
Yeah.
shades and spectrums of all colors of gray, in between, and really individualizing it for each person is important. And I think that people resonate with different treatments and therapies that are going to be good for them. They have different things going on, dispositions. Um, but also, talking about the dose, I do think we're in a place in time right now where diet and lifestyle a couple of decades ago or even a decade ago was, you could do that and you could make profound shifts, and you still can.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing a lot of people come in on perfect diets and taking a bunch of supplements and doing all things, but they're just so toxic, inflamed, or these infections have taken so much hold that we need
Yeah.
stronger, more potent medicines to really get them back to a baseline where diet
Yeah.
and lifestyle can then take it from there. And so, Yeah, the dose is really important. And I think as a pharmacist, I do have this piece that is helpful for that, where I think a lot of integrative practitioners and I see, they just, they're doing some of the right things, but they're not necessarily increasing the dose to the necessary thing to really be able to kill what we need to kill, or to be able to um, do what we need to do based off their actual symptoms and where they're at
Yeah.
right now. And I'm a little
Good.
aggressive, but I just have a way of just resetting the systems. We can just
Yeah.
reset the system. We can put them back into maintenance. So I do deeper work with people for a shorter period of time just to reset things and then put them back into maintenance.
Yeah, God bless you for that, because that's hard work, man. And I know you probably get a lot of text messages and emails like, "I feel like shit right now. What do I do?" And you're having to be
Oh
a
yeah.
come to Jesus, almost like a psychiatrist more than anything, right? At some point, as a practitioner, I remember having that happen quite a bit. I remember the guy that I partnered up with, Ozone, which I want to talk a little bit about Ozone with you, because I know we had a
Yeah,
little
of
brief
course.
conversation via text not too long ago about it.
That's
But I would
Ozone.
see him, deal with it like crazy people. He did Ozone completely wrong. Like, the way I was educated and learned, you remember Blake, and he was real big on like hooking people up directly to the machine and just blasting them with Ozone for like 15 minutes at super high doses. And people would getting like sick from it and
Yeah.
hurting. And he'd be like, "Oh, you
Sure.
just detoxing. Oh, no big deals." And I'm looking at him all fucking jacked on testosterone, growth hormone, and steroided out of his fucking mind. And like, and I'm like, and, uh, and I'm over here like, like just seeing all this, and I'm just like, man, this is crazy. But Ozone has its place. But I guess kind of my point to it all is just like, man, when you go, the dose in the medicine is based, or the poison in the medicine is based on the dosage, and the
Yes.
dosage needs to be applied properly. And it's, I see a few people talking about, they talk about it in a way that I don't agree with, in the sense that like they'll be like, "Oh, well, if you smoke a pack of cigarettes, if you smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, it'll knock like 10 years off your life. But if you walk past cigarette smoke, it won't even take a second off your life." And this idea that, you can, you know, have aspartame in your Coke, and you can smoke a cigarette or drink some alcohol here and there. It's not a big deal. It's not going to hurt you. But where these guys miss the mark is that it's this accumulative effect
Yeah.
of this stuff that's causing the problem. So yeah, that one sip of Diet Coke with aspartame isn't going to kill you. But when you add that to everything else, and the fact that you're going to keep doing that shit over and over again, you're just building up this load of toxicity.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where I agree with you so much, that like, if you're going to live that lifestyle, you're going to live that way in your mind and justify your bad habits, because there's always a better solution, like for Diet Coke, for example, like just drink a stevia soda. Yeah, it's got shitty natural flavors in it. They're loaded with maltodextrin that fuck your gut, but it doesn't have aspartame and caramel color and freaking titanium dioxide and 1,000 other ingredients inside a freaking Coke Zero. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of going on a rant here, but I guess what I'm getting at here is that like, you see this idea being pushed out right now that like these things aren't as bad as you think they should be, but in reality, it's this accumulative effect of these things that's really causing the problem. And then they
Yeah.
need to come to someone like you and get in there and scrub those walls, and kind of just get cleaned up, you know?
Because a lot of these toxins, you're right, are toxic and they haven't been tested anyways. But the ones that have been tested, it's isolated just with that toxin. And so they might say
Right.
a certain level, but the reality here is that we have a synergism of many toxins at a lower dose,
Ah, yeah.
all synergistically poisoning the system. And so, just like why herbs and things are more effective in some way, they have this natural intelligence of many different phytomedicinal nutrients that are having synergism, acting on many different receptors with a natural intelligence here. Um, the same thing's happening on the toxicity side. There's many things hitting it from different angles, knocking
Right.
our systems down. So
Have you
totally.
seen that new study that just came out about the beta glucans, which obviously beta glucans can not only just be found in medicinal mushrooms, but where they did like a study for 14 days. These people took like 1,000 milligrams of beta glucans, and there was an 8% drop in forever chemicals
Awesome.
in their blood serum. So, forever chemicals are these things that we called forever chemicals because we didn't know how to get them out of the body. We didn't know if they would ever get out of the body. We thought they were going to be in there forever.
Yeah.
And we just found out that, medicinal mushrooms and beta glucans, I think, are in like oats and some other things as well. Obviously, not just medicinal mushrooms, but we're finding out that these types of foods and healthy habits and things, and the mushroom kingdom, the fungi kingdom, oh man, like we could go for hours on that, but they're actually mitigating some of these effects. And I just wonder if, like, what else are we going to find out? What's the next study that's going to come out? Like I remember seeing some, because microplastics are a big deal now, right?
Yeah.
And it's like we've kind of figured the metal part out, right? Like you guys have figured that out. Like what to use with the nanoparticles to get the metals out of the cell. You know what chelators and binders to use to get them out of the body. We know things like sauna can help. We know ozone can speed up this process, blah, 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 healthy diet, fiber, cha, 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 cha. But microplastics, like, oh, how do we get these out? And then we're seeing like a little bit of research with like BPA and fermented foods. So things like kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, all the, fermented foods, functional foods, which get deemed that because of their alchemical process of
Yeah.
working with bacteria and yeast and fungi to create something different, which inhibit all the anti-nutrients that, the carnivores want you to think like you get from eating plants, which is a bunch of fucking bullshit, in my opinion, because we need plants, in our diet. But yeah, I just wonder like what's going to come out next,
Yeah.
and so I guess kind of like where my whole point to all this is like, man, if you just move in that direction, change your trajectory, get with someone like David and get on maybe even a diet, whatever diet you choose, whatever skin of the cat you want to, whatever, whatever path you want to go. That more than likely we'll probably find out in a year or two that what we are doing is just helping. You know what I mean? Because I know you've eaten medicinal mushrooms. I know you love reishi and
Yeah.
chaga and cordyceps and all that good stuff. But we didn't know that they got microplastics out of the blood till, a month or two ago, and that study came out. So
Yeah, it makes sense. They're the decomposers of our world, and they
for
can break
mediators,
down things that are
yeah.
not needed and toxic. And so it makes sense they're doing that in our bodies, just like they're doing it in our environments as well. But yeah, I mean, I would say that really we are able to get out a lot of these microplastics and things, and a lot of the same strategies that I mentioned to you before. And I do a lot of testing for toxicity, and sometimes we do general markers, but there are, if patients want to expend more money, we can isolate the top, 100 or so that are very common, and we're
How
able
do
to
you guys
see
doing
all the
that?
different categories, what is actually in the system. Then we have a baseline, we do some detox, and then we do another test to see our success. And we are able
Okay.
to move the needle and get rid
Okay.
of a lot of these plastics and things as well, which is great.
So you can
But
test for plastics like in the blood or hair? Because I know like I see a lot of the oligo scan for the hair, and I see like blood test as well.
yeah,
What are you finding to be
well,
the best?
usually for this particular toxin test that I'm mentioning, will be actually metabolites of these toxins, and they'll be measured in the urine. But we can
Okay.
measure, there's different markers in the blood and things as well. We can do
Okay. So
that.
you're doing it all: urine, blood, hair,
Saliva, genetics, and the one
saliva.
piece on
Jeez.
genetics actually we didn't finish here, but which is my major point here, is that a lot of the people that have autism and a lot of complex chronic disease even have genetic mutations like MTHFR, which make it
Hmm.
much harder for them to process this very toxic world around them. People
Yeah.
with MTHFR, again, with 30% of the population has one mutation here, have a reduced ability to be able to process these things. They're more vulnerable. So 100 years ago, if they had this one mutation, it wouldn't have been a big deal. Now that they're saturated in environment toxicity around them with this little vulnerability,
Ah.
it's taken
Okay.
advantage of, and they start
Yeah.
collecting in the system. So the
Yeah.
autistic children, a lot of times they will have an accumulation from inherited from their mothers called generational toxicity. Again, 20% or so of the load of the mother goes into the child. But then they're also passed down the genetics of some of these dysfunctions, not only in methylation in these B vitamins, but also glutathione or NRF2. So these are other pathways of detox that can be blocked. And so this is why we generally will support, if we don't have genetic data, we're going to support all these major pathways of detox. And I do believe that our bodies have the innate capacity to break these things down. They're very intelligent. They just can't break down the extreme amount, and having these external sources of these supplements and
Yeah.
nutraceuticals to really get in there, bind them, and move them through can be very helpful.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. It's just like you said, it's in our skies and in car, pollution in the city. It's just constantly bombarded. So it's like you can get them out, but you got to stop the pressure or
Yes.
lower the pressure, especially with the shit they're spraying in the sky. Yeah, it's a trip, man. Yeah, and I've got a few greenhouses, a few 100-foot greenhouses, and I'm like, I just
Awesome.
see the night and day difference from what I grow. And yeah, it's plastic on the greenhouse, whatever, but I see the difference in what can grow in a little hoop house than out in the field. Like I literally stopped all field production because it's like we'll get some weird rains, and typically after it rained, things just blow up and things look beautiful. But I've noticed like weird films on things here and there, and just like weird shit that I don't see inside the greenhouses. It's an interesting thing, you
Yeah,
know.
it is.
Because there is some, you brought that up in the beginning, like the spring. I'm sure Texas will be next to ban that stuff, like Florida did. They kind of fall right in suit with each other. We'll see.
Yeah, well, we
Um,
actually had I'm really proud of Texas and just being an innovator in the field, and just pushing. It's very progressive. I think a lot of people are surprised.
yeah.
We had that $50 million grant to study ibogaine for addiction and mental health and neurological
Really? When did that go live?
plasticity. It's the biggest, happened like maybe 2 weeks ago now. And so this is the
Really?
biggest sponsorship by a government in the entire world. And Texas is leading this initiative here. And I'm very excited about ibogaine. I think ibogaine is a solution for our times, because all of us have just this dopamine dysregulation and the kind of
Yeah.
deplenishment of our ability to feel content and feel driven to focus on one thing in our life, because it's so easy to be able to get that from the external world through the
Yeah.
porn or social media or the sugar or whatever it may be here for our individual vice. But when we have this lower dopamine production, which in many ways is from the toxicity, from our gut issues, our brain is not working at all of the cylinders it's supposed to, so it's not making as much dopamine. And then we seek to the external world for that feeling normal in a way. So that, again, that can be, getting into the capitalist train of buying things, or again, porn or whatever it may be. But when we have a vulnerability, it's very easy for an external structure to take advantage of that. And so
Yeah.
if we can have just optimal neurochemistry and dopamine production, we feel content and happy and focused and driven internally, then these things in the external world can't affect us as much. So
Right.
that's kind of where I'm at with things in life. It's just that there is a lot of things in the external world that we cannot really be able to fully ignore or prevent from actually affecting our system, like the toxicity, like the exposure to these EMFs, etc. But we can strengthen our bioenergetic shield. We can empty the bucket so we are really clean and clear, and we can have optimal neurochemistry so we aren't drawn into all these different ploys to steal our money and our souls. So
Yeah. 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 I think about we're more electrical than we are chemical. And then what conducts electricity? And those are metals.
yeah,
And then
it
when you
makes us
keep
an
talking about
antenna
your
for
bioergenic
5G
field,
radiation.
right. Yeah. It
So a
makes
lot of
so
people that
sense.
are really sensitive to 5G, when you look deeper in the system, they have a bunch of metals in their system. Once they detox those metals and their energy shield is up again, then they're
Dude,
able to
that
have
was so me. That was so me, bro. Like we were living in Carrollton and I was like, I got to get the fuck out of here. Like I can't do this. And
yeah.
I think it was just the metals, man. Like I said, I got this bullet in my foot.
Mm,
Luckily, we found a spot. I got one bar. I'm on Starlink out here. We're not even that far from the city, but
that's great.
I can't even play a song like on my normal data, which is good. But then also I've noticed that like, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but the research I've seen is like when you have like one bar, your phone like really is pulsing radiation
Mm,
even harder to try to grab. So I try to just like stay away from my phone. And then we have the Christmas tree timer at night that turns off. My son gets mad. He's 12 now. He likes to stay up in the summer and play and do his thing. And then like Christmas tree timer's like, no, sucker, off. Everything's off in the house. Sorry.
Yeah, we do
Shut
that too.
off. Yeah, denied. And then we're big on like the grounding stuff too, the silver, and got a buddy who makes some cool stuff called No Choice. He makes all the silver garments. He made a bunch of onesies for my daughter, and we did a little trade. And he's got little like silver onesies he made. It's so cool. Organic cotton,
Cool.
silver onesies. Yeah, yeah. I'll have to give them to you, bro, because like my daughter's gonna use them, and then your daughter will need them, and my daughter will grow out of them, and like she's gonna wear them like what 3 or 4 times, and they're like $200 or $300 a piece, you know. So it's like to like
Cool.
give them to
I'll
you
take
to
them.
wear.
Sure,
Hell
please.
yeah, dude! Like and
My
then
kids
pass
will
them to
love that.
someone else. You know how baby clothes are, right? Like you get
Uh-huh.
them and then they're like of no use in like 2 months.
We
It's a
have so
trip.
much baby stuff right now. I just question the need for this much stuff, but I think it's helpful and
It's
someone else.
evolved a lot. Like I mean, my last child was 8 years ago. So the stuff
Wow.
that my wife's coming up with now, I'm like, what is this? And she's like, oh, well, it does this, this, and this. And I'm like you. I'm like, we don't need this shit. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need all this crap. Like, quit buying all this crap. But then I'm
At
like,
the same time, like what you said, it's like
kind of
just the whole
cool.
goal of life
Yeah.
that the women are taking care of. So if this can make it easier for them, then
Happy
great.
wife, happy life, baby. Let's go.
Okay.
Buy what you want. Like,
That's a
I don't
good
give a shit.
philosophy.
Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah. Oh, man. It's so cool. So, hey, I wanted to ask you about ozone, and because I didn't know you were like big into ozone, and we obviously developed our machine a few years ago, which you probably had no idea. But what's been your experience with that? Is that something you guys are using in your detox protocol, metal protocol? um yeah, where are you at with ozone, and how's that? Are you doing it yourself personally? Do you have a machine at
Yeah,
home? If not, let me know. I'll hook you up with one. But yeah, give me the skinny on your ozone experience. I love hearing people that use it.
sure. Yeah, I mean, some of my story is that I, had many brain injuries and I lived in a toxic mold home. And then I got Lyme disease a few years ago and I got another head injury. And so there was just a lot of inflammation in my body. And I had an infection at that point that was also taking a hold. So I had to learn and bring in all the tools. Herbs were not enough. Just traditional functional medicine wasn't enough to get me over this, out of this hole that I had dug myself in. And, I think that things like ozone, hyperbarics, using pulse electromagnetic field therapy and red lights and all that was very helpful during that time. Ketamine sessions to reset some of the neurological things going on. But ozone specifically, I like it because it's just very cost effective medicine.
Yep.
And I like molecular medicines in general because of that fact. I think it's really important to learn about. I think it's very important for community and for the world to understand how to use these medicines because they are very cheap and you can have a machine and you can treat so many different disorders and dysfunctions in your own family. So for homesteading or for people that just want to be more autonomous and independent, for just being able to support people in their health in the community as well, because I've always been a big person, very generous with my resources to be able to help people in need regardless if they have the money or not. But
Hmm.
supplements and things cost still a pretty penny, and I can't just give that
Yeah.
for free. My time is there's a limit to that as well. Having a family and so many patients I'm taking care of, where all these machines and technologies I have, I've purchased one time and I can put someone in a hyperbaric. I can give them an ozone treatment just like that. And it's free to me, basically. So
Yeah.
I'm really into using technologies and I use it a lot for community and people that I'm trying to help. Whether I use it in practice a lot, I do definitely. But I would say that we start off with some of the medicines and herbs and doing the kind of the basic work we talked about of fixing the gut and detoxing the system using labs that can be very specific to what's going on, individualizing treatment for them. And ozone is an option for people that are want to make faster progress on a lot of things. But also, especially if there's chronic infections involved, so if they have
Yeah.
Lyme disease, for example, that's going to be something I'm going to recommend because, a month of supplements sometimes can be $1,000, you know, if we're really hitting it hard to do all the things we want to do at the same time using nanoparticle technology. And ozone, you can buy a whole unit for $1,000 or $2. And even one ozone treatment is sometimes $300, and ozone doesn't work very quickly. Ozone actually, you have
No,
to
it
be
takes
pretty
time.
regular about,
Yeah.
be consistent about through the mechanisms of action, which we can discuss here. And you would have to do 20, 30, a lot of different sessions regular over time to really reap the full benefits of ozone. And that would be so much money, where you can have an ozone machine for a couple grand, and you can do rectal insufflation, which is 80 to 90% as effective as, autohemotherapy,
Autohemotherapy.
where they
Yep.
take the blood out, they ozonate it so it's bright red and put it back in your system, which takes
Which
an
you can
hour.
only do a few times a week, bro. Like you can't hammer
Yeah,
yourself with a needle like that every
burn
day.
out
But
your veins.
insufflation, like I've done an insufflation for the last 3 weeks every day. I do 3 week protocols and then I get off
That's
for a week
great.
and I'm
I do
finishing
too.
my third week right now. And it's like, dude, I just go in there and
Yep, yep. And molecular therapies are cool, is that, how I see them and their place here, in one way, is that they are not the best thing necessarily for any one thing, but they're really good for a lot of things in a very general way. So they're
Yep.
great complements and augmenting of other protocols and treatments. So I wouldn't necessarily rely on it just in
No, you
itself
can't.
for
It's
any
a
one thing.
conjunction. Yes.
And it can be for some people, but the rate of disease and things that I'm seeing here, it's not usually enough here,
Stack
but
it,
it's
bro.
great to complement. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I love what you said about molecular therapies because I also think about hydrogen, hydrogen being like this master antioxidant,
yeah,
oxygen being like one of the number one things we need. You need more oxygen, you need water. But when you think about water, H2O, hydrogen's in there with the oxygen.
yeah, yeah.
It's so powerful, man. But I'm totally with you. Like doing it by itself and then going and eating a cheeseburger, no, not gonna work. And when I say cheeseburger, I mean like a In-N-Out burger or a
Sure, yeah.
McDonald's burger, right? Not a regenerative grass-fed beef burger. But anyways, I've kind of gotten off the buns. I don't really eat too many grains anymore. But
Good for you.
but yeah, man, there's something there that happens with the ozone and how it can just basically kind of speed up everything, speed up the detoxification pathways, kind of get everything kind of lit up. And then if you take vitamin C with that, if you take your nano chelators in with that, it's just going to allow all that to work better,
Yeah,
and
but you got
I
to
think
take
so many
your
of it.
antioxidants at a different time as your ozone, though, from at least what
Yeah.
I understand, because one's an
No,
oxidative
for sure.
therapy,
You wait.
one's
You
an
wait. Yeah.
antioxidant therapy. But interesting
Yep.
enough, as you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And
Charles,
one
but
thing
just
I
for
love
our
about
listeners, I'm sorry, there's a little delay here in the wireless here, so don't mean to be jumping over you here. But it's
no, you're
creating
good.
some oxidative stress initially, and that ability to create oxidative stress is what's able to kill a lot of these viruses and pathogens and bacteria and parasites as well. But the real kind of benefit in ozone, as you know, is that it's causing a little oxidative stress, which upregulates all your internal endogenous antioxidant enzymes to then be able to create and strengthen that shield even more. And so this is why it's really able to
Mhm.
help with a lot of autoimmune disorders. And we have this aspect of immune modulation, which is very good over a longer period of time. So it can kill things more initially, but it can modulate the inflammatory response. And this is so important in our day and age because, we have the concept of this aphorism that's used in Buddhism called the allegory of the two arrows. And so the first arrow is sometimes shot at you by life, by the traumas we're exposed to, by the toxin we're exposed to, by the accident we get into, and we can't prevent that sometimes. But the second arrow is self-inflicted often because we are reacting to that thing that happened. We're judging that thing. We're avoiding dealing with that thing, and that's creating more suffering at a late level of consciousness. But at functional medicine, at a biochemical level, it's that inflammatory reaction. It's our immune system freaking out and then creating all this oxidative stress to try to deal with that potential pathogen or attacker, which is really not causing as much damage as sometimes the PTSD reactivity of your actual immune
Mm,
system going haywire.
mhm.
So even with Lyme,
Yeah.
something that we see as one of the most pathological, smartest, crazy bioweapons that our government has created, which, that's a whole nother discussion here of how that was created by Billy Bordorfi, microbiologist of the CDC, which is, on Plum Island, which is right down the road from Lyme, Connecticut, where it happened to be 3 different co-infections that were totally different than they've ever been before and way more pathogenic and virulent, all showed up the same year because it got released, of course. And again, Billy Bordorfi did show that, and attest to that on his deathbed.
Look up Plum Island. Look it up, people. Just
Yeah,
fucking YouTube Plum Island. It's right outside New York. Just sitting there.
yep, yep. And so it is, this thing that can create extreme inflammation and be part on people's system, but still what we can see here is that, your body is reacting to that thing, creating so much inflammation that it's causing a majority of the damage there, because it's the Lyme is drilling into your system and collagenous structures. It's going intracellularly into your cells, and your immune system trying to kill it is causing all this damage. And if there could be some equanimity here of the immune system to see it maybe not as this big attacker and not be so reactive, you can really minimize and be much more efficient with your immune system's action to actually do what it needs to do. And so ozone is this
Yeah.
helping to retrain the immune system by regulating and upregulating these antioxidant systems inside your body, so you're able to do this yourself. So you're not reliant just on some external thing to do that for you. So that's why I love ozone. It kills things, but it's also helping with that second arrow, which is so important. And this is why the Joe Dispenzas of our world and things that we do to affect our consciousness, or even meditation, we develop this equanimous mind to be able to observe things with non-judgmental, loving awareness. We're able to see these things inside ourselves at the level of sensation. Our immune system adapts in this exact same way to be able to be not so hyper reactive and shoot out all this cortisol whenever
Right.
we are exposed to any of these toxicants or these inflammatory molecules or these infections, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, and I've always loved how Frank Schauberger explained ozone too, and like his old clinic and everything he was doing. And I think he was in Nevada, but he's just written so many amazing books about ozone. And when I got turned on to him and I actually spoke to him, and he helped me kind of develop the machine we have now and everything,
Awesome.
it really blew my mind, because I had, done ozone. I learned about it, from Blake and everything, and always thought it was cool and all, but really got a sour taste in my mouth after my experience
Mm,
with him and how he was using it. And so, but when I learned about how, and he would always say, he was like, look, ozone's the only oxidative therapy that can't oxidize you, because ozone, when it enters the bloodstream, it can't oxidize anything over a pH of like 8, right? And obviously we would be dead if our pH was that high. And I don't quite fully understand that, but I do know, like, um, hydrogen peroxide therapy can oxidize you if you're not careful. Like, it can really hurt you. And I do
yeah.
know that people can do too much ozone and hurts, but from what I understand, it's literally from the toxins that they're not able to chelate out that's causing the herx, not so much the ozone that causes the herx.
Yeah, and the
Um,
die off of when you're killing all these pathogens in the
yeast
system, they
and
are filled
parasites.
with all these toxins and they're releasing into the
Yeah.
system. So you always got to open up the liver gallbladder channels and make
And
sure
take the
that
chelators,
drainage
right?
systems are open before you do too much killing or detox.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But that's cool, man. I didn't know. I knew you dealt with Lyme in the past. I think that's something we had first talked about when we first met. You know what I mean? And I was just curious how you're using it. It sounds like you were using it for your personal health and well being. But I love that, and I love that you're able to bring that tool into your repertoire, because yeah, it's just like one of those things. Like, it's oxygen. And
Yeah,
I'm big on, you know, ozone, but I'm also big on antioxidants like hydrogen. I love Dr. Patrick
sure.
Flanagan's stuff with the mega hydrate, and stacking that.
Yeah.
And I love foods like cacao, which are like number one food source of antioxidants in the world, right? And so it's always fun to be able to like stack these things together. And I think that's like the new thing too. You see a lot of like, what's the stack? What stack are you on? You know,
Yeah.
people are realizing that they don't just, there's not this one thing, but what's the combo that you're doing, you know, to get yourself there. But one thing about ozone that I thought was interesting was this idea of oxygen utilization. And it goes into
Mhm.
what you said. Like, yeah, you can do one ozone therapy and you'll get some benefit. But for ozone to really move the needle permanently, from what I understand, you have to improve what's called your oxygen utilization. And like the root cause to like why people get diseases and whatever, we could say it's metals or this and that. And obviously those are huge contributing factors and they have to be addressed. But when we look at the molecular like level of what's happening, we see that the body, specifically the mitochondria, aren't able to utilize oxygen effectively. And ozone helps switch that needle over to where your body can use oxygen more efficiently and effectively. But that
Yeah,
takes time.
it does.
That takes time. That's more of like a person that uses ozone for 4, 5, 6, 7 years starts to really move the needle versus someone who's just using it to maybe treat some symptoms or to feel better, you know, for a couple months. Um,
Yeah.
and and that's what I always kind of try to like educate people on too, is that like this is why you need a machine. Because to add to what you said, you know, it'd be so expensive to do that at these clinics. And God bless these clinics because they're getting people aware of these therapies,
Yeah.
you know. But at the end of the day, I felt like we needed to develop our own machine because I felt like, yeah, this is something that, like, to really move the needle, for it to really work, you need to have your own. Yeah, they cost, you know, 2 grand to get started with or whatever. But like you said, when you add up the amount it costs to do a therapy and then in the long term of what this is, how you're going to use it, it's pennies, you know, in
Yeah, it's so much
comparison.
more cost effective, and the cost
And
of
just,
6 sessions or something to have your own machine to be able to do it conveniently from home
yeah.
for the rest of your life, you know?
And then ease of use, like rectal insufflation takes 5 minutes to do. Like you can do it in the comfort of your home. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to get poked with a needle. Autohemotherapy is amazing, especially when you use the ultraviolet light. Like we've got this lady that we work with, Canary Company. Love Rachel. She is fucking amazing, amazing human. And I'll go up and I'll go get the drip with her. She'll come to our office. I wanted to do this podcast at the office and we're both getting IV drips. Why we did I just I couldn't
Next
get it to
time.
happen. Yeah, next time for
You
sure.
have a new
But
baby, it's
she,
a good excuse.
yeah, bro, it's been kind of tough. But she's pulling the blood out, she's ozoning it, and then she's running it through UV, like
Yeah.
ultraviolet light, and then pumping that back inside you.
And
And
then
then
you
she's
can,
hitting you
like,
with the NAD.
then you can put
Yeah.
some methylene blue in there, then you have the red light to activate it as it goes through your system, and you can filter the blood before it comes in. I mean, there's all these
Dude,
little
it's
enhancements
you're
you can do.
lit. You know what I mean? Like a little NAD shot. But again, you know, like that's not something that's super sustainable to do every day. But I love doing
Sure.
that at, you know, as much as I can, 4 or 5 times out of the year. And rocket fuel, bro. I feel like it's kind of dangerous when I get done doing it because I'm like, let's go, have fun. Like, I was like, want to go back to my like teenage self for a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
But you can do that
then
from
reality
home, and
strikes.
you can get a lot of that benefit from doing it at home, and you can be much more regular and consistent about which is the
Yeah, that's
most
the key.
important thing to have
Yeah,
that
and
epigenetic regulation long term.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I guess that is the biggest takeaway, right, for everyone is like consistency. It's you got to find something not only that you'll comply with, but something that you can do consistency, something that do consistent, something that's sustainable, that works for you in your life. And that's the ultimate path, you know, to get on and to be on. And you know, where the metals aren't going away, toxicity is only getting worse. But what can you do every day to kind of like start to slowly move that needle? Because it didn't take, like when someone gets a disease or get a whatever going on with them, it took years for them for that to manifest to the place to where it is, to where they're like, shit, you know. So it's gonna take time to get it to go away. You know, it's just like,
It can be, and from my perspective, I guess I'm doing things in a very clinical way where I am able to isolate exactly what's going on in someone's unique biochemistry. There's no guessing involved. We just fix and reset the system. Those are over a couple months, and then we put them into maintenance and teach them how to use things like ozone or be on some
yeah.
baseline basic supplements or something like that. But if you don't do that deeper work, you have to have a lot more maintenance every
Yeah,
day
I mean, if
just to
someone
be
like
able to
extreme
maintain.
disease, extreme remedy, right? If you're in that place, you've got to get in there and scrub the walls,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then get to a place to where you can live a healthier still live a healthy lifestyle and apply those tools. But yeah, no, I totally with you, man.
But what
Man,
I love
God,
about ozone also here is just the ability to use this for so many different issues that you would have in your normal life as you go through life.
I
And
mean, name one you can't use it for. It doesn't exist.
yeah, it's so useful. And since you have like a little syringe and you can do ozone insufflation in your nose if you have a
Yep.
nose infection. A lot of people have biofilms and things all up in the
Mm-hmm.
sinuses, creating all
Sinuses.
types of inflammation and
Mm-hmm.
toxicity going directly into the brain. And so if you have sinus congestion long term, it's a good idea to do a regimen of something like ozone
Yeah.
with some nasal rinses and things, like just get that biofilm out. I remember when I hadn't done it in a while, I did it just a few weeks ago, and this biofilm bacterial green plaque of stuff that who knows how long had been up there just kind of came out. And
Wow.
these biofilms are in different areas and they're creating a lot of inflammation. It's nice to move these things out. And we also can use ozonated water for some of the more digestive
Yep.
issues and some of the parasites and things
Stomach,
here. We can make
kidneys.
our own ozonated oils to put
Yep.
topically on places and also ingest those. Some
Bro,
of the newer,
that's
yeah,
the only thing we've been able to use on the baby is the ozonated olive oil right now. Like we feel safe using, like just
yeah,
if anything happens, like I think she had like a little bump or something, maybe got hit by a mosquito, we put the ozone olive oil on it. But
perfect,
yeah, man.
yeah. And then, even the new thing is ozonating glycerin, because glycerin can
Yeah.
actually
Oh
stay
yeah. I
for
wanted to talk to you about this. Tell me more.
yeah. Well, it's cool just because, when you do ozonated water, it may only stay for a few minutes,
30
10 minutes,
minutes,
something
15 minutes. Let's
before.
be honest. 10, 15 max. Like,
Yeah, no, it's losing it, or even at 10 already. I mean, you want to just do it as freshly as possible once you
mm-hmm.
ozonate the water. And that's it's not so hard. You might have to do it every morning for 10 minutes or something, but glycerin, it holds for many months here. So you can have that ozonated and it can go directly into the system. And it can go deeper into the gut actually as well and go further down compared to just ozonated water. So if you're doing rectal insufflation, you're getting that very systemically. Maybe you're getting the
Yeah.
lower GI a little bit. And then you're definitely getting the liver because it goes through the portal vein directly into the liver to
Yep.
neutralize some of the oxidative radicals and mold toxins or whatever that is there. But we also can take things orally as well to get that upper GI system, the bacterial overgrowth, some of the parasites as well. So you're hitting it from both ends can be helpful and useful and necessary when you're dealing with more complex chronic issues
I
there.
agree so much on that because ozone works, but you kind of got to get it to where it needs to go. Like, and if you got a upper, intestine, small intestine infection, you definitely like, I've seen people like a lot of times I'll tell people like, hey, take the ozonated olive oil, put it in a gel cap, and throw it down the hatch. But it sounds like you could do the same thing with this glycerin, ozonated glycerin. Now, I got a question, because like the ozonated olive oil, that's like Nikola Tesla's kind of thing, right? Like it wasn't really a thing until he made it a thing and he has his own process on why olive oil was the choice versus other oils. It, when you do it right, it completely changes its viscosity. So it goes from like a normal olive oil that you're used to like Vaseline, like, or at least the stuff we get, it's fully saturated, right? It's got ozonides in it. Does
Awesome.
that same thing happen with the glycerin, or is it just like, how do you know it's saturated, or is it just like a time thing, or do you even know about any of that? I'm just so curious because I'm big in the manufacturing world, right? Like I process herbs and manufacture shit, and so
Yeah, the glycerin, papers have just recently been released and is just being integrated into industry. So I think there are still a lot of questions on what the best manufacturing processes are, and um, I think that it represents a high potential is not fully explored yet. There's ways to be able to get that deeper into the system, and even with oils, can tell you honestly that with the machine that I have, I can't make oils very well. So maybe
yeah.
your machine is just much higher quality that you're able to make oils here, but usually you'd have to just have that on for so long, and it's just not practical to really get high concentrations, at least compared to what's maybe manufacturable, because they're using much higher quality units with higher concentrations to be able to ozonate their oils, from what I understand. So the water is very doable at home, and I think you can do like low grade ozonated oils and things at home. I think from what I understand about your unit, is that right, Charles, that you can actually ozonate oils from home?
Yeah, so we were able to put two ozone cells in our machine, so it allows you to have that variability to make oils. But the caveat with oils is
Awesome.
like you don't want to run your typical oxygen tank to make oil because you do have to run it. Like most people like that I see online, they're like, "Oh, run it in a room for an hour and then walk away and then come back and keep doing that and there's your ozonated olive oil." I'm like, "Dude, that shit is not ozonated olive oil. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
that's not changing
No.
viscosity. To make the ozonated olive oil where the olive oil changes viscosity, the first thing is you have to have real olive oil. That's the hardest thing, right?
Yeah.
Because there's not enough olive trees in the world for the amount of olive oil that's on the market. So half of it's shit and the other half's cut. And so there's a small percent that actually is real. So that's a challenge in itself. But when you're making the oils, you need something that can do about, it's like 108 gamma is really kind of like where you want to go, maybe a little bit higher on the gamma on the strength of the ozone. But you have to use an ambient air oxygen supply machine. You can't
Yeah.
really, you don't really want to use a medical grade oxygen tank because you'll burn out your tank. And
Totally.
it has to be temperature controlled. You need something around 60 to 65 degrees, which obviously doesn't work too well unless you got a full on setup, AC'd, HVAC'd and everything like that. And then you also have to regulate that pressure. So there's a couple different types of regulators you have to have. There's an ambient oxygen machine you have to get as well. So you have to have a different setup. But with our ozone cells being 100% quartz glass, and there's no ceramic or there's no titanium inside of our ozone cells, we're able to make what we call purified ozone. And the types of cells that we're using, since they're not coming out of China, we've been able to stabilize the ozone output. And the only way that we're able to really confirm that is we just test, 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 and test. So we have three
Yeah.
ozone output machines, and we make sure that those numbers are all hitting at the same level. And so before the machine even
Amazing.
goes out to a consumer, it's been tested with those machines to show that the ozone output is stabilized. But then we also tell people like every 5 years, send us your machine back and then we'll recalibrate it just to check it and to make sure, because you could have dropped
Cool.
it, you could have messed it up, you could have run, oxygen through the machine and maybe there was low oxygen, maybe there was something in the tank. Shit happens in life, right? It's not guaranteed.
Sure.
Usually it's user error is the problem.
Yeah.
Is usually why shit messes up. Let's be honest. But at the end of the day, yeah, to make ozonated olive oil, you need a machine that can pull in that higher gamma, but in respective, regardless of the machine, you have to have a different setup to make the oils, and
Yeah.
to make
Totally.
them right. Yeah. So,
Oh wow. I really need to upgrade then. It seems here. Then I can
I mean, if
make
you want
some
to
of my
make
own.
oils, but look, you don't need high dose ozone for, internal use. You know what I mean? Like, unless you're fighting like a really tough cancer, look, we, it's hard for me to want to say this because it's like, if someone listens to what I say right now and they apply it and they're not ready for it, they can hurt themselves and hurt themselves. But my point here is this: high dose ozone, I've seen work very good when applied correctly in the right way. And so usually you have to build up to that. It takes time and you have to have everything else in place too. Like,
Hmm.
but I've seen people that haven't done high dose that have had stage 4 cancer and they didn't work for them, right? So it's a trip, man. Like everyone's different and you can't just jump into it doing high dose. Like you got to kind of start slow and build
Most
up.
definitely.
Yeah, because every day you do an ozone, it's literally in your system for about 2 or 3 days. It's cycling through. So like I'm on a 3 week protocol right now, so I'm on my third week. So my ozone levels and oxygen levels are really fucking, and not really my oxygen levels. It doesn't really raise your oxygen levels. It just
Sure.
doesn't really raise any of your levels, but it just kind of gives you that little bit of that micro stress on the body that activates all the systems. But after that building up for a few weeks, you get to a place to where you're just like, you're, I guess you could say you're saturated, but really your body's just like at full max capacity and you need to kind of, you
Yeah.
know,
I
chill
think
out.
what's happening a little bit here mechanistically is because the mechanism is by stimulating your own endogenous antioxidant
Exactly.
enzymes to be able to protect you more, then you're able to handle higher doses without causing damage to your cells. And that's what's different between us and a lot of these other pathogens is that we have internal mechanisms like SOD, superoxide dismutase, and
Mm-hmm.
catalase to be able to neutralize these oxidative radicals that are being exposed to repair. so it doesn't cause damage, but these
Right.
pathogens don't. So when we increase the oxidative stress and we've continued to build it over time, we have this really, really amazing shield to protect us from the oxidative stress from these higher ozone states, but the pathogens don't have that. And so you're able to get a deeper level of cleansing and a deeper, get some of those more difficult pathogens out.
Yeah, starve them out because they can't live. And I'm almost on this like whole new, it's not a new thing. I've known about it for a decade that, there's no such thing as a virus. It's really just these parasites and these metals that are really like what you need to go after. But regardless of what it is, virus, parasite, these organisms can't live in an oxygen rich environment, right? They can't live in
Yeah.
this ozone rich environment. They physiologically can't live in it. So as you saturate yourself and you kind of like maintain those high levels and then you
Yeah.
stay there, eventually these parasites come out of hiding, and they typically come out during the full moon, which here we are.
Right
We just
now,
came out of one,
that's why you're hitting
right?
it hard. I'm hitting it hard right now. This is a
Yeah,
good
and
time
that's
to do it.
typically how I do it. I wait till like my last week is that week of the full moon because I know if there's anything hiding inside my body, it's going to really want to try to come out during the full moon.
Yep.
And if my levels of ozone are real high, then I've given myself the best chance. So that's
Got
kind
it.
of cool, right? Because you're applying like astronomy or astrology, if you will, more so astronomy than astrology, with ozone and healing, and and
Hmm.
then that can kind of go into its own conversation for probably 2 or 3 more hours. But it's so cool, man. It's so cool. So cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very cool. Love Ozone. Love what you're doing here. Seems like your product is superior than what I've been using here.
Oh
And
no, man. Look, just I'm always like, do your thing, get it, do the ozone,
get
do the
it
zone.
in.
It's get it
But
in, man. There's many ways to skin the cat.
but it
And
is nice to be able to have a double cell, be able to get those higher concentrations, because sometimes you do need those higher concentrations for a variety of different treatment protocols.
yeah,
But
like
either way, the rectal insufflation, that's where you're getting it. That's cheap. That's easy. It only takes 5 minutes to
yeah,
do. It's absorbed so
yeah,
quickly. It just makes sense to me in many ways here.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I'd like
good
to,
knowledge.
like for a long time we had the bags, and people would use the bags and they say like, oh, after 5 uses, you have to throw the bags out. So I've kind of moved everyone. I'm like, get the glass syringe. You don't have to use the bag. The biggest glass syringe though I found is only like 100 milliliters. And
Okay.
sometimes people are doing like 750 milliliters of ozone gas, which I
Yeah.
think is like pretty heavy. The guy that taught me, he was hooking you up to the machine for 15
Yeah.
minutes, which would be equivalent to like 2,000 milliliters, which is fucking nuts.
Yeah. That's too
Uh,
much. Too
that's
much.
way too much. And what I want to find though is like some type of glass catheter or something, because I just get kind of like, I don't know, it's all silicone and it's ozone resistant and all that shit. But that's
Yeah.
my next thing I want to find. Is something
That'd
that
be nice.
I know it's kind of gross, but whatever. I'd rather
Yeah.
put glass up my ass than silicone, I guess, at the end of the day. But
Sure.
breakage would probably be a huge, factor there, and like how you have to like, move
Uh-huh.
your body
Uh-huh.
to insert it or whatever.
I mean,
But I'm
100
sure.
milliliters is not insignificant, but you would want like a higher dose maybe because of that. But you can only go so high because it's going to be caustic to the mucosa of the gut. So
Exactly.
sometimes people won't
Yeah.
go over 40. So I don't know. I like to do more, but I like to just do more anyways on things. I do the whole bag at a
Yeah,
time
like
usually.
if I'm doing my ears, I'm connected to the machine. And I'll
Yeah.
sit
Okay.
there for 10 or 15 minutes. If
Or your
I'm doing a
lungs, if you're
breathing,
going through oil, getting those ozonides for
I'll do
respiratory
30
infection.
minutes.
Yeah,
If
that's
I'm
really
if
low
I'm
dose. And
bubbling it
so,
through yeah, if I'm bubbling it through olive oil, then I'm definitely, in a breathing treatment setting, it's 30 minutes. And that's one of the best things for my daughter. Like she doesn't like the ears. And obviously
mhm,
the kids aren't doing anything rectal, but
yeah.
they'll do the breathing treatment, and they'll just sit there and chill out for 30 minutes. And it's just a phenomenal way to do it. But when it comes to the insufflation, yeah, sometimes I use the bags, but look, I got my own machine. I'm in a place where I will bump it up to like 80 gamma when I'm doing just 100 mils. And that's typically where my dose is at 100 mils. I forget what the actual amount is. And in my head, I don't know where it's at, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty much, because our machine has 3 different variable settings, and then the settings on the regulator will also dictate that. So we just have like
Yeah.
this wide, very wide range of settings that you can access with our machine. And I think that's part of why I feel like it was the way to go, and part of why it's so much different than anyone else's machine out there, because you can, depending on what you want to do with it, you can kind of go super low dose or you can go super high dose,
Yeah,
because
totally.
you never know what's gonna happen. You might need that high dose, but
Well, this is
well,
so
man,
great. I love talking with you about all these topics we're so passionate about
yeah,
here.
bro,
Man, we didn't really even talk about tonic herbs and herbalism and
bro.
all the health
Okay,
as much. I was like, that's what I was
send
expecting, but we got to
send
go deep on a lot
yeah,
of other stuff.
send me your address though, bro. So there was a lot of narco terrorism in Ecuador for the last 4 or 5 years. It's starting to clear up now, and so I was having to get cacao out of like other areas, and I was still
Oh,
getting
wow.
the arriba criollos that I was being told. I think a lot of it was still CCN 51, but my buddy Robert, kind of like we've kind of reconnected the last 3 years, and we've been micronizing whole beans from these arriba criollo, true criollo beans
Amazing.
that are like tiny, and we're doing a micronized screw press with the skins on to create the powder. So I'm getting
Wow.
the flavanols tested now, but I'm pretty positive it's going to be like completely through the fucking roof, because I'm taking like tablespoons of this stuff, and the phenethylamine is so high that like it's just like, what the fuck am I on? So send me your address. I want to get you some just to like have, you know what I mean? You can throw in your
Thanks,
tonics
bro.
and stuff like that.
I appreciate that.
So
Yeah, I think it's the
yeah.
the new revolution. If caffeine and coffee was the old uh, age that we were just in of the mind and productivity, then cacao's opening the heart, and it's
Man, and that's always been my vibe. Like since 17, 18 years ago, like cacao's what got me into this, because
yeah,
it cracked open my heart and my brain, and it got me off caffeine, and it just allowed me to feel that space. And Ecuador is on the equator, which is almost like the area of the earth of the heart center. And it's just so funny
mm,
because
makes
the
sense.
Cosmo study came out. I don't know if you saw this, but heart disease is the number one killer in the world. It takes out like 9 million people a year.
Mm,
Everyone's worried about fucking cancer, but no one's talking about heart disease. And it just blows my mind because it doesn't even scratch the surface on what heart disease does to people.
sure.
And the Cosmo study came out and showed a 40% reduction in cardiovascular death with just 2 tablespoons of cacao powder twice a day. But the data
Okay.
was 500 milligrams of flavanols. So it depends on the cacao powder what will determine the amount of
Sure.
flavanols. And obviously, the better the cacao, the higher the flavanols. But holy fucktard, David. Like a 40% reduction in the number one killer in the world just by having chocolate, like sign me up. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's go.
Amazing. Yeah,
So it's
theobromine it causes vasodilation, so it just opens up the
versus
less
yes.
stress on the heart.
Yes.
But then also, it's just deplaquing the whole blood vessels to increase the diameter, to also increase that ease on the heart and the
The
cardiovascular system.
polyphenols, the antioxidants, yeah, the anandamide, which is a bliss cannabinoid endorphin, which also works with the phenethylamines. Like it's just such
Yeah,
a powerful food. It does need to be done right. You got to test it for heavy metals. That is a concern. But one thing we have to understand is most of the chocolates being tested and shown to have high heavy metals is cacao bars, and those are made with cacao liqueur, a cacao paste. And the manufacturing process there typically is done when you have like when you get whole beans and you make nibs or you make whole beans or you make powder, a lot of the shit gets pushed into the presses for the paste. So the lower quality of like just cacao manufacturing typically gets pushed to paste. And I think that's part of the reason why. Now, chocolate's $1 billion industry, right? And most of it is CCN 51. And that's a hybridized variety of cacao. But look, I get it. I get why people grow it. It's a smaller tree bush. The skins fall right off of it. It's easy to work with. It's more disease resistant and all that shit. But the caveat there is it's higher in phytic acid. It's lower in flavanols. It's lower in phenethylamines. It's lower in theobromine.
high in
And
caffeine.
yeah, and it's I'm not for sure on the caffeine content if it's higher or not, but I would probably say so. But I would say like for me, if I have CCN 51, I have a bad experience with cacao. Like I get
Mm,
jitters, I feel off. And I think a
yeah,
lot of it though too is
different.
from the fermentation process. Because when you ferment cacao, it's a bean, you got to ferment it. If you ferment it too long, or if you don't ferment it long enough, you throw it off. It's an alchemical process that's happening. And that's why I've always kind of moved back to Ecuador for cacao sourcing. Yeah, it does. You know, the cadmium levels, like it's like, so cacao in Africa has zero cadmium, but cacao in Africa is all CCN51 and it's high in phytic acid. So it can burn your mouth, it can burn your cheeks, it can create a lot of reactions in the body with mold and stuff like that. So I stay away from it. Sorry, Mr. Beast, your cacao shit. Um, but at the end of the day, you know, just on that note, people are eating chocolate bars from him. So it's like mainly just diluted ass, you know, there's not really real power there. But again, you know, going back to more of these wild varieties and going back to where cacao originated, that's in Ecuador. And very little of that is in Peru. And it's one of the only places in the world that still has the Arriba Criollo, the heirloom wild variety that was put there by the Godhead, the master
Mm,
architect, you know.
yeah.
And again, I've found good cacao everywhere, and I see people in Nicaragua, oh, ceremonial grade cacao, and they're doing the cacao paste. But man, I just there's something about a full micronized bean with the skin that, man, I'm just
Wow.
hiring a
That's
tree
next
lizard
level
all the time.
right
Yeah, yeah,
there.
dude. Yeah, send me your address,
Can't
bro.
wait
I got to
to,
send you some of this stuff.
yeah, I
Yeah,
can't wait to
yeah, I'll
try
load
that.
you up.
I'll add that into my regimen. I have cacao
Yeah,
every day anyways, but this is way
yeah, I
higher
know
in
you do.
quality.
Yeah, so I just want to show you this one. Yeah, let you taste it. But God bless you, bro. We're 2 hours on the mark here. I know you probably need to get home to mama and make sure everything's
Well,
good
I
there.
actually have a
So,
patient. I had a patient 15 minutes ago, but I messaged her. I let her know, so it's not a
oh
big deal here. And this is a pleasure. I don't get much time to get to connect with you. You're always so busy. I'm always so busy. We're family men. We're trying to change the world, but it's nice for us, to be able to connect and collaborate and
yeah.
co-create and brainstorm. That's so important. And I hope that your listeners really appreciate some of the information we
Well,
shared today.
let them know, where can they contact you. I know I get this a lot. Hey, who should I go to? And I try to
Yeah.
pass people to you, and it's sometimes Dr. Michael, who's the whole radiology thing or whatever. Where are you at? How can people contact you? What's your information, your email, anything you want to give out right now? Let's hear it.
Cool. Yeah. So again, Dr. David Morcom, do functional medicine here in Dallas, Texas. We are telemedicine, so we provide services to all around Texas and even other places in the nation. We have practitioners that I have trained and I have certified to be able to actually do root cause medicine, to reset these root systems of the body, to do this deeper work. So if you've been struggling with complex chronic disease and you need more support and need someone to help carry you from disease back to health, we are the ones to help you here. And if there's complex chronic issues, sometimes seeing a practitioner, getting labs, individualizing through an actual consultation is the way to go. But I understand not everyone has that ability at this point in time. And so I want you to know I have a passion project as well. And it's called the Vibrant Life Community Cleanse. And it's a way that I've used to create an e-course to be able to teach people how to do this deeper work of fixing and resetting the gut for a month and then doing a cellular detox for a month. And you might need to do a little bit longer to fully get back to where you are, if you're really, really sick, for example. But that's usually where I'm starting a lot of times anyways. And so you do some of that work and you're still having issues, then you can pay the money to kind of see someone like myself to dive deeper. And so this helps you individualize, goes through education, and you have food plans and recipes, and all the supplements are included. And the cool thing is that the course is basically free because it's just for the cost of the supplements here. Everything else you're getting support with just comes with it there. So that's at vibrantlifecommunity.org. And again, my website is www.integrativewellnessfx.com. So thanks so much. And I'm happy to share knowledge with you, Charles, and to kind of talk about all the things we love and love all your products, man. I'm just going to keep on integrating the day life, and let's hope we live to 100 or more.
Absolutely, bro. And we need to connect. We need to get together, especially with the kids. And maybe if you guys can find some time, or maybe if you can find some, I know you're about to have the baby, so it's going to be tough for you,
That's
but
cool.
maybe in a few months, man, like in August, if you got some time to ever come out, um, let me know. I'd love to have you out here. We go on the lake quite a bit. We got a little boat
Awesome.
and stuff. We go surfing and stuff on. We do and all
Yeah,
that jazz.
dude.
So
I'm into
yeah, bro.
wakeboarding and surfing, all the extreme stuff too. So we have that in
Cool.
common. But yeah, man, we have
Um,
kids the same age now too. Because my other kid is a 7-year-old too, and so I'd love to get them together to be able to hang and
yeah.
play.
So how about
And
this? As soon as your baby's ready to go, like
yeah,
we took ours out to on the lake last weekend, which I think was a little too soon, but she did
yeah,
great. She loved it.
nice. Hell
It's
yeah.
technically illegal to have the infant,
What? That's
but
funny.
when you're ready, let me know. Bring the fam, and we'll do a fam day, and we'll just I'll take my fam, we'll have your fam, we'll go out there, we'll relax, we'll chill, we'll enjoy the weather, and yeah, enjoy each other and break some bread, bro. It's been too long.
Yeah, I would love that so much, man. I really resonate so much with you and your mission and just everything that you represent. And yeah, I'd love to get the family together and just have some family time. But also, there are some things I want to talk to you about. This is kind of, I think we're after the podcast at this point here.
Here, let me
But
stop. I'll stop the recording so we can like have a private conversation here.
yeah, yeah.